Sure. Jennifer is the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we're very glad that she can be here with us today. Please welcome her.
Peter opened with a disclaimer. I'll open with a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. So I want to thank the organizers of this event for recognizing the urgency of this moment and for recognizing the need to build a powerful solidarity movement against these recent FBI raids. This afternoon, I will attempt to do three things until I see the wrap-up thing pop up there. First, I'd like to talk about changes in FBI powers and surveillance since 9/11, which make all of us suspects, whether or not we have visited a country associated with a group on the State Department list, or a list of, quote, foreign terrorist organizations. And second, I'd like to offer a little advice, although again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to offer some general advice about what you should do if the FBI comes to your door. And finally, if there's time, I'll just say a couple words about how we can and must fight back, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more discussion about that today. So let me first say something about how post 9/11 changes in FBI powers and the structure of surveillance relate to the recent raids. And while I do that, I wonder if we can just pass around this handout so much. You're no doubt familiar with the USA Patriot Act. It was back in the news this week because both the House and the Senate voted to extend for 3 more months the deadline for some of this law's most controversial, I would say onerous, provisions to expire. So basically, I'm going to try to see the glass as half full and say we have 3 more months to convince Congress to repeal or amend, especially 3 provisions of the Patriot Act. Both of North Carolina's senators, Kay Hagan and Richard Burr, voted for this extension. Both of them should hear from us immediately about our disappointment in their failure to protect Americans' civil liberties. Only 2 members of the House from North Carolina had the courage to vote against this extension, Mel Watt and David Price. That's it. All others, including Brad Miller, voted to extend these violations of our rights. Sometimes people come up to me and express their concern. Why doesn't the ACLU endorse candidates? And I just roll my eyes and say, give me a break. I urge you to thank Congressman Price and Congressman Watt for the courage that it takes for them. This wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last, that they stand up for what's right and tell the rest of them that we're deeply disappointed. And 3 months from now, we expect them to take a more courageous stand and oppose provisions of this overbroad law that eviscerate our First, our Fourth, and our Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution. The Patriot Act has made it easier for the government to carry out surveillance of our telephones, our emails, our internet activity, to carry out secret sneak and peek searches of our homes, our offices, and our personal effects. For example, one provision of the Patriot Act, Section 505, allows the FBI to use, quote, unquote, national security letters, which are issued without any judicial oversight, to seize records from universities, internet service providers, credit card companies, and individuals. And recipients of these national security letters are gagged from telling anyone they got one. And the penalty, if they reveal that they've been ordered to turn over this information about you, is that they could face long jail time and fines if they talk about getting this letter. At least 30,000 such letters have been issued every year since the Patriot Act was passed in 2001. 30,000 letters a year. With the information that is being seized, being dumped in huge databases that now contain some 2 billion, with a B, records that are mined for quote-unquote suspicious activity. There have been several Inspector General reports about the misuse of national security letters. Back in 2005, one investigative journalist unearthed evidence that they were being used to build a database of 10,000 political Academies managed by Karl Rove. In addition to the new powers given the FBI by the Patriot Act and other legislation, changes in FBI guidelines adopted in 2002 and again in December of 2008 gave FBI agents the power to monitor and infiltrate groups engaged in protected First Amendment activity without having suspicion of any wrongdoing, and they can use ethnicity and religion as a factor in opening these investigations. In a recent report into the surveillance of the Thomas Merton Center in Pittsburgh and other groups that are on the handout we just circulated, the Inspector General found that the FBI had, quote, little or no basis for spying on some advocacy activity and had lied to cover up this fact in the case of the Merton Center. However, the threshold for initiating surveillance is so low now that we're pretty much back in the bad old days of J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO in terms of what the FBI can and cannot do. But the FBI acting on its own is just part of the problem we now face. The ACLU describes the new surveillance system that's been erected across the nation in materials that you can find on aclu.org. I know we don't have time to go into all that today, but I bet many of you here probably remember John Poindexter's Total Information Awareness Program. Steve's nodding. Based at the Defense Department's, based at the Defense Department's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, the existence of Total Information Awareness became public in 2002. The idea behind it was to use powerful computers to search all possible commercial and government databases in order to detect hidden patterns indicating possible terrorist activity. I'll just skip ahead, but if you just think about this, if finding a real terrorist is like finding a needle in a haystack, compiling all this information on innocent people is just throwing more hay on the haystack and making it more unlikely you're going to find the actual needle in there. So this is the world we live in today. The definition of intelligence work has dramatically expanded. It includes the broad collection of information about everyday activities in the hopes of detecting and preventing some kind of future behavior. Phone calls, emails, web browsing activity, financial records, credit reports. We could talk about the fusion centers. I'll skip ahead. I'll just say, in terms of what to do if they come to your door, don't say a word. You have the right not to say anything. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to have an attorney, to consult with an attorney before you answer any questions. And so I just want to stress, don't talk to them. It's not a crime to remain silent. But if you say something that can be construed as untrue, the penalty is 5 to 8 years in jail. So just don't say anything. And you're not required to let an officer come into your home without a warrant. Ask to see it if the officer says that he or she has one. The officer pushes his way in without a warrant. Say loudly that you do not consent to a search. I've had people call my office and tell me that that works. So you need to make it very clear you're not consenting, and hopefully other people will hear you say that. And if they say they have a warrant for your arrest, ask to see that too. And I'm sure we'll talk more about what we can do to fight all this.
Okay, so we have an addition to this panel, and we have Layla Yagi from Raleigh, North Carolina, and she's here to speak about her son, Ziad. And so please welcome Layla.
Hi everybody. I'm not used to public speaking, so bear with me. After I'm done with this, I want to speak a little bit more, and I want people to ask me some questions, please. I stand here before you asking for help. I have gathered every bit of strength left in me to come and speak about my son, Ziad Yagi, who is with the Raleigh 7 or the North Carolina 7, accused of terrorism. I want everyone to imagine what I'm about to say. My son Ziad Yagi and I have been followed by the FBI for years, simply because my son went overseas for a visit to our ancestors' land. How can a simple visit to family members turn our lives upside down? I ask you, If we were from a different religion, would this have happened to us? Would every step my son took be interpreted as an action of terrorism? Kickboxing and going to a youth camp was all interpreted by the FBI as training for jihad. I am the one who encouraged my son to go to kickboxing instead of football because I was worried about injuries. Over a year and a half ago, I came back from running an errand for an old lady to find out that my son was in jail. I got a phone call that my son has been incarcerated for terrorism charges. I screamed and yelled and ripped my clothes apart. I screamed and cried all night long, and to this day, I cry till I have no strength left in me. Our civil rights have been ripped from us. We have been targeted by the FBI simply because the guy whom they accused of as the ringleader said things that are considered free speech. And my son knew this guy for a very short time. Mr. Boyd was talking, of course, against the war. 7 people's lives have been interrupted and shattered because of free speech and are accused of conspiracy to kill and maim people abroad, of course, in material support. I have a question, though. If my son did not know half of the people in the group, how on earth is he conspiring with them? This country has become a police state, a fascist state. I want my son back. My son did nothing wrong. Please help us and join me on Facebook to learn more about my son. And if you know any pro bono lawyers or human rights activists, lawyers, please let me know. Thank you.